Welcome to the International College of Integrative Medicine podcast, translating science to clinical practice since 1983. I'm your host, Luke W. Russell, and right now I'm joined by Dr. Scott Doughty. Dr. Doughty, thanks for sitting down and chatting with me.
Oh, totally, Luke. It's great.
So tell me a little bit about your practice.
I have UP Holistic Medicine. We're up in Marquette, Michigan, on the north coast of Michigan, up on Lake Superior. I've just passed the 4-year mark of having been in private practice, doing what I guess amounts to everything else. I was once asked by a shoe salesman, "What's holistic mean?" And there, while I was getting shoes fitted, I said, it's medicine is pharmaceuticals to most people, and surgeries, and holistic is everything else that might encompass or encourage health. And therefore, there's a lot to talk about.
No kidding. So 4 years in private practice. How did you get into the private practice and holistic world?
I was changed by a 10-year career in the Indian Health Service. I was in Zuni, New Mexico, doing work with amazing people, both the doctors that I was working with, but maybe even more so the people that were living there that were our patients. And what I learned there was that healing, no matter how hard we tried to drive the pharmaceutical healing in the direction of the native people, that we couldn't outdo what was happening on all the other levels of their function. Yeah. So you think about the diet and the exercise, you think about stress, huge stress. In fact, I was chatting last night with some friends and I said, we aren't capable of withstanding the stress that is their norm. Mm-hmm. And so no surprise that there were health effects of that kind of reality. I left there, went to teach in the residency program in Marquette, Michigan, where I had trained, and while on the faculty, started to develop an understanding of these other ways to identify health markers and improve upon health and go beyond the pharmaceuticals and the surgeries that are standard of care.
Yeah. So 4 years in private practice, what was that like for you jumping out on your own?
Because I had been in this faculty role, I had time. You're in faculty, so you're teaching. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have a student, you're thinking and reading and learning. But they also let you play doctor. 2 half days a week, I got to see my own patients. Mm-hmm. And because I wasn't on the treadmill having to crank out a patient every 7 to 10 minutes, I built time into my patient interactions and would be going to conferences and learning some of these integrative techniques and then applying them. In the process of the 5 to 6 years that I was doing that kind of clinical practice, I developed a following. And lo and behold, it became unsustainable to continue to call myself a teacher of the standard of care while having an integrative practice 2 half days a week. And I knew that it all just came together because I needed to leave, because I needed to do this work. And the number of patients that had already accessed what I was offering meant that when I opened up the doors of my new practice 4 years ago, I was busy from the beginning.
Wow, that's so neat.
Yeah.
What do you feel like over the last recent months or a year or so, what's new in your practice?
Ozone therapy.
Okay,
yeah.
Talk to me about how you've been applying that.
Well, I'll just say that a lot of the things in an integrative approach, you have to prioritize what you're going to learn about and incorporate into your toolkit. And my patients who were getting ozone therapy out of the area were coming back to me and saying, the thing that really helped my Lyme disease was when I went down to Wisconsin and saw Susan Peck, and she treated my Lyme disease with ozone, and you should do that. Well, the way the universe works, David Brownstein, who's a mentor of mine, publishes an ozone book. And then I go to an ozone course last fall in Grand Rapids at the ICIM meeting. We had a pre-conference on ozone. And that was all it took. I had a Lyme disease patient who wasn't going to be able to make that drive to Wisconsin. So I said to her, it's time. I'm going to do ozone here. And that's been fantastic because I'm doing ozone systemic therapies with blood treatments, but now I'm also doing prolozone, so ozone injections with nutrients into joints and treating things that I wasn't treating prior to. I wasn't treating that way prior to introducing ozone into my practice.
Yeah. Can you share a story or two and how what you've seen with patients with your ozone therapy?
Oh yeah. So I have a patient who's in his 80s, still working, still very active, has had both knees replaced, so has proven that his joints can inflame to the point of destruction.
Yeah.
And when he came to me and said, I think that this ozone that I'm hearing about might be worth trying in my ankles. And I said, I agree, let's do that. So we did ankle injections that day, and he stood up and said, wow, okay, feels okay. Now I was a little reluctant to do both because if it didn't go well, then he's not walking out of my office so well.
Yeah.
He walked out just fine and emailed me a few days later and said, it feels good, and the good feeling isn't wearing off, as in, wow, I'm in less pain. And I responded and said, okay, let's think about doing it again in a couple of weeks, and we'll just try to layer this healing in. So we did it a second time. And then Tuesday morning, before I drove over here for the conference, he was in my office again, and he said, the left one is good now. How about we just inject the right one today? So again, we don't ever think of ozone injections as a one-shot deal, see you back in 3 or 4 months like the cortisone shot. The ozone is layering in and adding in. So to have him reflect in his own experience that improvement was really gratifying. And now we'll see when, that's the other nice thing, he decides when it's time for the next one, because he's worked in his own formula as to how it's benefiting him, which side, which one, or both. And that's a really fun way to work with people.
Yeah. And isn't that almost, I think, almost beneath even the approach of integrative therapy is this driving principle of patient choice, and that's like that it shouldn't be dictated by an association with the federal government but that it's like this driving force to allow the patients to say, this is what I want, and rather than just being, we're so used to doctors saying this is what you need to do, and then we just do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing to as a physician like yourself.
Well, it feels very natural for me to meet people where they are. And if somebody is completely naive to integrative medicine and is used to getting the arthritis medicine and the acid blocker and the antidepressant, and they come to me because they have a friend or family member who did well with me, that's a different person than somebody who's already had books read and conferences attended, because some people or all these online webinars or online summits that people can do.
Yeah.
That both of those types of patients are really fun for me to engage with, because it sets the stage as to where we start and where our conversations go, and that means that there's no cookbook. I have found the key to this for me is having time because with visits that last long enough that people can relax in the visit, they think of things that weren't even on the list that they wrote down or the list that they left on the kitchen table. They end up thinking beyond what they had thought they were going to talk about, and so do I. And that's where the flow of it really feels good, when stuff just is allowed to surface that moves our conversation forward or moves it to a higher level of understanding and connection.
I'll be back with more in just a little bit with my interview with Dr. Scott Doughty. First, let's listen in as Executive Director Wendy Chappell shares a few thoughts.
Hello, this is Wendy. If you are an ICIM member, I want to be sure you are getting the most from your membership. We have a great page on our website, www.icimed.com, where we highlight members' blogs. This is a really good way to check on the many projects and practice focal points of your colleagues, and we want to make sure that your blog is up there too. On our website, we have great opportunities for you to get some marketing advice from Luke and ISEM's own in-house team of social media and multimedia experts. We offer legal advice from our general counsel, John Richardson, and tons of emotional support when you need it. Both marketing and legal help are listed on our website under the button Member Resources. New membership benefit that you can find there is that in that same section of our website, you can now listen to past lectures for free. More good things come from membership, such as honest conversations by email where colleagues share questions about challenging case studies.
Now let's get back to my interview with Dr. Scott Doughty. How do you feel like you've transformed as a physician? You've been in different environments over your medical career. How do you feel like as a physician, your approach, your ideology, well, maybe less the ideology because that's kind of obvious, but how do you feel like your approach has transformed?
Probably it has transformed around data. I've always wanted to connect with my patients. Now I have the time to do that.
Yeah.
Now when I was teaching, I had time to do that. When I was working on an Indian reservation, I tended to have time to do that because I was there for 10 years. And that wasn't a transient population. So you spend 10 years in a community and I know your siblings and your neighbors and their cousins, and so the relationship was rich. That's been, fortunately, kind of a bedrock piece of my foundation. But the transition out of standard of care medicine and into integrative medicine has been just a data buffet because there's so much more that can be known about looking into the system to see how it is signaling, functioning, messaging, indicating how or where we start to optimize someone's health. So it's been a fantastic journey through various labs that have helped to raise the quality and quantity of the data, and then the various therapeutic approaches, whether that's supplements or ozone or electromagnetics or mind-body, all of those things that we now have as tools to engage further with people around what we've learned. So again, it completely personalizes it, which on busy days can sometimes get exhausting because you sort of go, oh, those doctors that are just prescribing a statin drug and a non-steroidal and a PPI, and then they're on to the next one. When I hear about doctors who are seeing 20 to 30 patients a day, I know that that's what's happening. I don't envy that at all, but there's nothing rote or cookbook about this approach, which is why we concentrate our efforts with more time and fewer patient visits in a day just to go farther. and that's a really fun trajectory to be on with people.
Yeah. And so I can really pick up on your enthusiasm. So I want to ask you about looking out at the healthcare landscape and seeing how there's just so many forces in so many ways trying to influence the direction of healthcare. When you look out, do you see hope?
The hope is not in the system becoming what doctors like me think is the best way to do things. The hope is, and it's more grassroots than that. I think it's more grassroots in organizations like ICIM, being full of people who are passionate about this way of assessing and optimizing health. And then, in this day and age, with all the information that's available to people, it's people voting with their feet and their wallets to seek care like this.
Yeah.
And then word spreads.
Yeah. Now, what would you say to young physicians, whether they're in med school, residency, or maybe fairly recently out of their residency program? What would you say to those physicians?
Well, the med students and the residents, I say, hold on, because you're going to end up learning a ton of things, but most of the energy that will be applied to you as a new mind to move forward with a medical practice will be expecting you to do things the way the system is designed for you to work in. And that means the short visits, the heavy prescription pad usage, the inaccessibility, and frankly, the confusion and disappointment that many people have around their insurance. And the doctor is in that. The doctor is nearly every visit with his or her patient having to at least empathize with the patient who's complaining about what the system is doing essentially to make it harder for them to get what it is they need.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, just buckle up, young medical student or young resident, and know that this is the system you have joined. What I might say to a college student who's thinking about medicine is consider naturopathic school, consider osteopathic school, because I think they are more, well, certainly the naturopaths are over there leaning in the direction of this approach.
Yeah.
But I think DOs probably have a leg up on most of the MDs in this regard. But then there are opportunities along the way, and we've had a couple of residents at our conference here who are in first-year family medicine residency, but they know what they want.
Yeah.
And they know where they're reserving a special segment of their brain power to not be consumed by the standard of care teaching or expectation, and they are maintaining an eye and a focus on integrative.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about ICIM as an organization. One, how long have you been part of this organization?
I've been part of ICIM for probably 5 years. I think it was probably 5 years ago. I'd have to really dig into the calendar and see.
Sure.
But I attended a chelation training course with Dr. Trowbridge, Dr. Chappell, Dr. Malfair, Dr. Soriano, and these were my initial exposure to ICIM, and then I was at least aware that there was an organization like this, and then I went and attended one of their conferences, met Wendy, and Wendy and I hit it off immediately. The way the universe puts people together, I met Wendy, and she's been the magnet or the glue that has kept me wanting to be a part of learning more from this organization, participating, and ultimately now it's just it's a big glue factory. It's not just Wendy anymore. There's a lot of cohesiveness here that we're all attracted to.
How do you feel like your participation with ICIM, both at the conferences and then beyond, once you're on an ongoing basis, how do you feel like ICIM affects you as a physician?
Where I live in Upper Michigan, I'm the only person that's practicing this kind of medicine in any full-time way for more than 100 miles. I'm pretty independent-minded, but I'm not a pro-isolationist.
Yeah.
So ICIM has been for me a wonderful community to feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And when I have questions, I have people that I can call. I now have people calling me, which feels like a milestone. In fact, he won't mind me saying, but David Brownstein, who wrote a book on ozone, called me last week and asked me a question about a specific way to use ozone. And it was really a nursing question. So I said, David, do you want me to just hand my cell phone to my nurse and then your nurse can talk to my nurse? And 6 years ago, I was in his office wide-eyed, wondering if I would ever begin to do anything like what he's doing. And the day he called me with an ozone question, I felt like we'd reached a certain stride. But that's the beauty of this. It's not just this hierarchy where all the smartest doctors are over there and all of the rest of us are hoping that someday we can go over there.
Yeah.
There's a blending, there's a conversation, and it's very rich at these conferences, but in between the conferences, it has been maintained, and that's very energizing for me.
Yeah. What would you say to the physician that just thinks, oh my goodness, I'm busy, how do I take time out of my practice to come to a conference like this? What would you say to them?
I would say you need to learn, and you are learning all the time anyway. Come experience what it is that you ought to know about, that you won't know about in time for you to really help people the way you really want to help people. And it will rattle your cage, because your cage that you wake up in every day and work in every day and sleep in every day, that cage of standard of care medicine is keeping you from having the time to let your mind wander in this direction. But doctors go to conferences all the time. There's nothing really out of the box about saying to your boss or employer, hey, I'm going to a conference in Philadelphia in March. It's about cardiovascular health. And everybody will go, sweet, that's important. Cardiovascular health, you have a good time. And bring back what you learned. The patients will especially say that, because patients don't get excited when they hear that their doctors are going to some family practice review course where they can learn more about the drugs that the patients need. The patients get excited when they hear about the integrative courses, because they know that it's going to apply to lifestyle and food and supplements and nutrients and natural things. So doctors need to learn, but doctors ought to be focusing on learning more than what the industry, the standard of care industry, is trying to teach them.
Okay, great. And do you have any final thoughts that you'd love to share with your colleagues before we close out?
Oh boy. I've said this a couple of times this weekend. I haven't been a joiner. I have been somebody who has generally, I don't know if it was it Will Rogers? It was Will Rogers or Groucho Marx that said, I would never want to be a part of an organization that would have me as a member. It might have been Will Rogers. That's sort of been my experience. It's partly why it was easy for me to leave a really comfortable and enjoyable residency teaching job and go out into private practice, solo private practice. But ISEE, as I've mentioned, was an organization that felt right to explore and then join. And at this conference, I was elected to serve on the board, and the part of me that doesn't join things is sort of a little nervous about that. But the honor that comes with that, that means that I get to stay in the game with these people and the work that's being done here. I encourage people to just have a taste of it, because what I think they'll experience is something that will touch the part of them that really is why they're even in medicine, and then a new fire is lit, and then good luck putting that one out.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Doughty. I appreciate it. It was great hearing from you.
Really good to be with you. Thanks a lot.